Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of More to Explore, where Mike and I keep you up to date with everything happening here on explore.org. And what a busy time it is. We're peak summer with all the live cams and events. So let's start the week off right with a couple of success stories. And first, we're featuring the Bracken Bat Cave, which you can see here in the background now. And we'll celebrate Burfle the Puffling, who has recently fledged. So let's get to it. My name is Brian Bird, and joining me once again is Explore.org's resident naturalist, Mike Fitz. Mike, good morning.
Hello, and hello to you, Brian, and everyone around the world, no matter where you happen to be watching from. If you're new to Explode.org, welcome to the community. And of course, welcome back to all of our long-time viewers. We are the world's largest live nature cam network with about 190 live cameras all over the world, which means there's typically too much for even me to know about, but that means for you, there's always something to watch. And if you have comments, questions for us during the program today, drop those in the chats. Courtney from Explore will be looking for those, and she'll pass those in our direction when you submit them. So thanks for joining us today. Right now, as Brian said, yeah, we're looking at Bracken Cave. This is a live view looking inside of Bracken Cave right now. You're seeing the home to the world's largest bat colony. And I want everyone to pay attention sort of what you see at lower left, because there's some black spaces on the wall. Those are all bats. And there can be hundreds of bats per square foot. I don't know quite how they do it, but it's a remarkable thing. They fit in there. It's amazing to see. So this is a special place, and bats possess remarkable adaptations, and they achieve feats of superb athletic ability. And watching them can reveal stories of caring parents and the learning curves that all young animals face in their journey toward adulthood. And these are only some of the reasons that we invite you to look inside Bracken Cave near San Antonio, Texas. And this is, again, home to the world's largest bat colony. It allows us an opportunity to see bats on their own terms and consider what life is like for them. We're talking about it now because late July and August is the peak bat viewing season on our Bracken Cave cams, because the pups that were born in the cave are moving towards the entrance, and they're taking some of their very first flights in their lives. And to learn more about this, I spoke with Fran Hutchins, the director of Bracken Cave Preserve with Bat Conservation International. Here is our conversation. Fran, thanks so much for being here once again. It's good to speak with you.
Yeah, Mike, good to talk to you again. Thanks.
So I've been watching, the Bracken Cave cam periodically, and it looks super busy right now. We've talked about this before, but I think it's always important to reiterate, why is Bracken Cave ideal habitat for Mexican free-tailed bats?
Well, the Bracken Cave is a maternity roost for these Mexican free-tailed bats. So we have pregnant female bats in the cave starting in early February, and they start having their babies in June. So you can think of the cave as like a giant incubator. It's 104 degrees inside the cave, really high humidity, and the bats are roosting about 117 feet off the floor, so they don't have to worry about predators. It's nice and warm in there. Nice, safe, dark space for these baby bats to grow up in. So that's why they like that. And it's a big space, so they really like the extra room.
And the webcam that we call Inside Bracken Cave has been providing footage of walls and ceilings lined with bats. The scene, to me, from my limited human perspective, it looks hectic, because sometimes even chaotic at times. I'm wondering how bat pups and mothers are negotiating for space in those situations and finding each other among the millions of bats in the cave.
Oh, early on, about 6 weeks ago, when the babies were born, the mothers were literally carrying the baby on her chest for a week or so, and they grow so fast that after about a week, the mothers can't carry the weight of the babies anymore. So they have these nursery sections in the cave where it's just pink hairless baby bats on the ceiling. So that was what was going on 6 weeks ago, and the mothers will go back and forth to nurse their young throughout the day, and they only nurse their baby, and they can find their baby amongst the millions of other baby bats, because they remember where the baby was last when they left it on the ceiling, and they also know what their baby's voice sounds like and what their baby smells like. So they literally will fly over to where the baby was last time they nursed it, call out to the baby calls back, and land on this massive baby bats and sniff around till they find their young. And you're looking at about 500 bats per square foot. So it's just amazingly dense grouping of bats, but these are large colony bats. They like that space, togetherness, so to speak. Also, too, this colony of 20 million bats is made up of thousands of smaller colonies that have come to this one place to have raised. And then, so that in the last 6 weeks, the babies have grown to they're about the same size as the adults, and this is when they start learning how to fly. So they're just learning how to fly, how to forage for food.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think about how they can find each other inside of the cave, and I'm also really curious about sort of like their social life inside of the cave, maybe just like excluding mothers for a little bit. We know from like watching captive bats in other places, like in zoo environments, for example, that they're very smart, and they can be quite playful. I'm wondering if that is an aspect of their lives inside of the cave as well. I mean, I imagine that maybe I'm wrong, but socialization maybe has to be part of their lives since they are shoved in such tight quarters or in such dense colonies.
Yeah, so when they're roosting and learning how to fly, they actually you get these colonies and these dense, massive bats really close to the entrance to the cave. And of course, bats aren't blind; they have very good eyesight, so bats can see where they're going. And it's never when you're watching the video, there's like, when are they sleeping? Because there's always moving around and bats flying around. So these young bats are learning how to fly. So they'll be stretching their wings out and poking the guy in the face next to them with their wings, and and they're constantly moving around, and they'll go fly around for a little bit and come back and roost. So you'll see little clusters of bats just kind of like not moving around. They're trying to catch, they're sleeping while all the other bats around them are moving around and grooming each other and grooming themselves. So there's always something going on. It's massive.
And the largest bat flights of the year occur right around now. So I'm talking to you end of July, midsummer. This is when the bat, pups begin to mature and leave the cave with their mothers, try their first flights. Can you perceive a change in the evening bat flight once the pups begin to join it?
Well, what we see is, one, we see the mass of bats really close to the entrance to the cave, and in some cases they're actually out in the light. So when we're sitting watching a bat flight, we can watch the bats with binoculars. We can see the bats on the walls are so close to the entrance to the cave. And you see the young bats flying around, and then when they are emerging, since they're still trying to figure out the whole flight pattern, where they're supposed to be going and all. So the juveniles tend to hang out close to the cave. They don't forage as far as the adults do. The adults will forage at least 60 miles plus every evening. So we'll see the juveniles. So on the preserve itself, we see a lot more bats flying around using our ponds, trails and whatnot. So there's a lot more visible activity around the preserve as the juvenile bats, young bats are learning how to forage for food.
And you touched on it just briefly now, but I was also wondering, what do we know about the journey of the newly, you know, uh, the newly weaned bat pups, the young bats as they're taking their first flights. So what is that journey like for them as they're learning to fly and hunt? You said they don't go as far as the adults, but what else do we maybe know about the next few weeks of their lives?
Well, yeah, so the mothers are still nursing them for a week or two while they're learning how to capture enough food to eat. Um, so yeah, so they're just figuring out this, so echolocating, catching bugs in the air. Also, they've got to dodge predators. So they one of the steepest, quickest learning curves is you don't come out by yourself. If you're the lone one or two bats that come out, so I'm ready to go, and they take off and come out of the cave without the rest of the colony coming out, then they're more or less like sitting ducks. There's just one or two bats in the sky, and they're really easy for the predator hawks to get them. So that's a pretty quick learning curve as far as safety in numbers and staying with the colony and the groupings of bats that you see when they're streaming away in the sky as they leave the cave.
And what will August look like at Bracken Cave? What can we expect to see on the webcams over the next few weeks?
Well, August is our best time. The days are the longest, so it doesn't get dark till around 9:30 p.m. and the bats are coming out just before around 8 o'clock. So we just have so much time to watch the bats flying. The stream of bats in the sky. We can watch them from basically thousands of yards downrange as they fly away from the cave. On Doppler radar, if you pull up one of the NOAA sites, Doppler radar sites, you can see the cloud of bats getting larger and larger to where it's like this 20-mile plume of bats over the cave as they emerge and they'll forage up to 10,000 feet in altitude. So there's a lot going on. That's also when all the hawks are around, so we can have 4, 5, 6 pairs of hawks, different species, catching bats for dinner. Also, too, the bats aren't the only juveniles learning to forage and hunt. That's when the adult raccoons will bring their babies into the cave area, or the skunks, snakes all come into the area to learn how and to hunt for food. So there's just a lot going on around the cave.
It certainly sounds like it. When can our viewers, or when would you recommend them to start watching the webcams each day if they want to see the evening bat flight?
So the outside camera will you'll start seeing things probably about 7:50 Central Time, and then for another couple hours we have infrared lights on the camera, so you can literally see the bats all night long. And then the inside camera throughout the day is focused on the inside of the cave on the walls. So all day long you can see the bats on the walls of the cave. The camera will move around and focus on the bats emerging, so you can look out of the cave like the bats do. So you see this huge vortex of bats. We call it a batnado. There's a swirling mass of bats at the entrance to the cave. That's going on all night long. And then in the morning, starting around 5 a.m., the bats are returning. And they're coming in from thousands of feet in the air. So it literally rains bats into the sinkhole. So if you're there in the morning, you can watch. The camera is focused at where the bats fly into the cave. So you can literally watch the bats streaming back into the cave early morning. So there's pretty much this time of the year, there's something going on all the time at the cave. So inside cameras. You can see what the bats are doing inside the cave throughout the day. And then you can watch the emergence at night. And then if you're an early bird, you sit with a cup of coffee and watch the bats come back in the morning.
Yes, always something to see there at this time of the year.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that information, Fran, and thanks for sharing your expertise. It's great to speak with you once again.
No, we look to see you guys on the webcams.
Thanks again to Fran Hutchins, the director of Bracken Cave Preserve with Bat Conservation International. If you want to learn more about the work of Bat Conservation International, just go to batcon.org. And of course, if you want to watch our live cameras, and again, this is a live look-in at Bracken Cave right now, just go to explode.org/bats. You'll be able to see the inside Bracken Cave cam, the outside cave cam to watch the evening flights and when they return in the morning. That link will also take you to a couple of cameras that we have with the Luby Bat Conservancy in Florida as well, where you can see giant flying foxes and a couple of other species. So I tend to love bats. I am I kind of love most critters in the world anyway, but I do recognize that bats are unfairly maligned and persecuted. I think we should give them a second chance, though. We should look at their true natures, which reveals intelligent social animals that are vital components of the ecosystems they inhabit. Places like Bracken Cave, where millions of bats find a home, are extraordinarily important. But I want you to consider how you might help bats in your area. So consider installing bat boxes so they have safe, reliable places to roost. You can also create pollinator gardens, which are spaces that harbor insects that become food for bat populations. And finally, speak out when bats need protection. Help people understand that bats aren't monsters. They're just trying to make a living, and they eat a lot of insects that we would consider pests or bothersome. There are also efforts underway to weaken the Endangered Species Act. So we need to oppose these because it would lead to harm and further declines of rare bat species in the United States. Extinction certainly can't be an option. Thankfully, the habitat at Bracken Cave is secure, but we need to work towards a future where it remains that way. And we did have a couple of audience questions come in about bats. I can answer one of them, kind of answer the other, but I'll bring them both up here. Jen Latt wrote in and asked, what is the main predator for the bats? You heard Fran touch on it just briefly, talking about like hawks in the air, maybe raccoons that maybe are scavenging bats that fall to the ground. There can also be snakes at the entrance to the cave as well that are looking for weak or bats that have crashed down into the ground. On the floor of the cave, it's something that we can't see, and maybe it's good that we can't because it sounds pretty gruesome. But if a bat falls to the floor of the cave, there are types of beetles that live in there, carnivorous beetles that attack the bats almost immediately, can reduce it to a skeleton within a short period of time. So bats are small animals. Again, they're feeding on a lot of insects, but they're small enough to be prey items for lots and lots of different predators on the landscape. Another one that I should mention that flies through the air is owls. So like great horned owls, for instance, they can gather at these big bat colonies, wait for them to come out and take them out of the air as well. So thanks for that question, Jen. And then Camop Maisie, putting me on the spot here. Thanks a lot, Camop Maisie. We've seen volunteers with nets looking like they were trying to capture bats when they were flying out. What's the purpose? I don't think they're tagging them. I think they might be just we'd have to ask Fran this, and I could be wrong, but I think maybe they're showing the people who are going to the bat flight that evening just to give them an up close and personal view with the bats. But I could be wrong with that. They could be doing it for research purposes or tagging, not necessarily tagging the bats, but they could be weighing them. Doing that over time helps to give researchers an idea of growth within the colony as far as like individual bats go, the relative health of individual bats. That's something that ornithologists can do with birds. You capture a bird, you can kind of look at its relative health when it's in your hand. You can do the same thing with bats as well. So maybe a couple different reasons there, Maisie, but I'll have to look that up. So thanks for those questions. If you have, oh, there's one more audience question that came in real quick from Anne. How many bats can be in a home chimney at the same time? Well, you heard Fran say that in Bracken Cave, like right now, several hundred bats per square foot. So if bats make a colony in your home, like in your attic or in a chimney, yeah, there can be several thousand bats easily in those spaces. So I think we can share space with bats. We definitely, what we need to do though is try to make sure that bats are, we're sharing space in the right way. So they're not necessarily like in our attic dumping guano in there. They're maybe on the outside of the home or on a pole with a bat box where they're living there. So if you move to exclude bats from like a home or a building, put up bat boxes first, because that if you give them an alternative once they're excluded from that space, they're likely to go to that alternative right away. So thanks for that question. And I also, before we move on from Bracken Cave, I do think this is a story of success. The story of Bracken Cave and its bats are a success story. We see success in the mothers who raise their pups inside the safety of the cave. We see success in the young bats that are taking their first flights. There's success in the conservation effort to protect bats within the cave, because cave protection for Bracken Cave in the past wasn't guaranteed. And then there's the immense benefits that bats provide to farmers. Fran and I didn't talk about it during this interview, but these bats are going out and foraging over agricultural fields, and they're helping reduce agricultural pests. They're also ensuring that farmers don't need to use as much pesticides. And there's actually some scientific research that says if you have more bats in your area, you need to use less pesticides, and then children's health is actually better. So this is a story of success. If we help bats, they can help us. Our next story, though, is a tale of success as well, because we're going to head to Seal Island National Wildlife Refuge in Maine, which is home to a population of thousands of nesting seabirds. Decades of work by dedicated individuals led to the restoration of puffins and other seabirds on the island. Explode.org's webcams with the Audubon Seabird Institute allow us the chance to observe the beauty and frantic pace of summer on Seal Island. Our resident Puffling, who you see here, nicknamed Burfle, and we watched this Puffling on camera in Burrow 59. It fledged on or around July 21. I think this is footage of Burfle leaving the burrow for the last time. And to celebrate the success of the Puffin parents, Willie and Millie, their Puffling, Burfle, and to help us learn about the next steps and the journey of young puffins, I spoke with Quinn Burkhart, who is a communication and outreach assistant with Audubon's Seabird Institute. Here is that conversation. Quinn, thanks so much for being here, and it's good to speak with you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's always a really fun time to come back and chat with Explore.
So first question, curious about this because I don't know the story, but I'm wondering about Burfle and the name. Where'd the name Burfle come from?
You know, it's pretty unique, right? Yeah, in the past, what we've typically done to name the Puffling, because so many people follow this Puffling closely and really learn a lot by his behavior and the behavior of the burrow. So it's always a really fun way to more introduce the behavior of this puffin to the general audience. So generally how we've done it in the past is people go into the live cam chat and they suggest names, and people who are tuning in can sort of help decide what to name it. And the internet these days tends to be a little bit chaotic, so this year we strayed a little bit away from having a multi-phase naming contest, and we did the same thing. We pulled names from the chat, we pulled names from people within the project, and we had one online vote that had 4 names in it, and Burfle won by a landslide. So it's funny because if you look it up now on Google, you'll see that our Puffling is really the Burfle on the internet. I Googled him this morning, and Google AI was telling me all about the puffin on our burrow. So it's kind of taken a life of its own, but it actually is also the name of a campfire game that's been played at camps around the United States for a few generations. So the game, from what I understand it, is led by one person, but people around the campfire join in, and it's the Burfle itself is this energetic mythical creature that the campers are teaming up to find, running through the woods, having a good time. So it's definitely a new type of Puffling name, but it's been a fun one, and we on the project have enjoyed it, and it's picking up speed on the internet. So Burfle is a trendsetter.
Well, I like it. I like the name Burfle, and we wish Burfle a lot of luck out on the open ocean. Before we maybe talk about that step in the Puffin's journey, I'm wondering what, if anything, stood out to you about the events of Burrow 59 this year.
Yeah, Burfle fledged right around 6 weeks old, and when the researchers banded him earlier in July, he was among the healthier chicks in the colony when he was tagged. So he grew really fast, and I loved watching him grow fast and be a little more interactive with the cam than I think some past pufflings have. He was very interested in the outside world, but also very interested in the cam. So we saw a lot of his movements and really saw a 360 view of his little chick body as he was growing fur or feathers and taking on a really entertaining look as he fledged there. It was also a pretty calm season in the burrow, last year especially, but historically we've had some pretty epic puffin intruders and some really interesting scuffles take place on the burrow cam. But this year, we had a few moments where we had an intruder or two in the burrow. We had an intruder who went in a few weeks ago while no one was in there and just sat there and fell asleep, which was pretty funny to see. So it was a relatively calm season on the cam, but I think as much as you can see a lot and learn a lot from wildlife by watching them interact with each other or endure hardships, I relished watching this puffling have a relatively relaxed early upbringing, and I think that we got a much clearer view of watching the puffling grow and develop because it was pretty relaxed. There were a few moments where other things happened that were kind of chaotic. So it was a really relaxed season for us, but I'm really grateful that he made it out safe. He grew up to be big and strong. So I'm excited to see what happens in Burrow 59 next year.
And right now, Burfle's embarking on a new journey. It's one that is risky, could be dangerous, but it's also, again, if we can, place ourselves in that Puffin's perspective. I mean, it's one that's filled with, adventure and opportunities to learn and explore. So, what is a young Puffin's journey like when they leave the burrow, and then what's it like when they head out to the ocean?
Yeah, so fledging for birds is really akin to when your kids leave for college. So it marks an important milestone for the puffling. It really means that Burfle is old enough to enter the next phase of life. So it's actually a little bit hard to tell when a puffling truly fledges. The best sign that we can tell in the live cam before the researchers confirm it is when a parent brings fish back and leaves the fish in the burrow and then it doesn't get consumed because pufflings are a lot like dogs, cats, they're very food receptive. So when there's food that just gets left in the burrow, that's kind of an indication that the bird has fledged, but it mostly means that the puffling is strong enough that he left the burrow, probably hung outside the burrow for a little bit. They tend to fledge at night when the chance of predation is lower. So he fledged earlier this week and he's making his way out to the northern Atlantic Ocean. So he'll live out there floating on the water like a true seabird. This is, I think, one of the aspects of a puffin's life cycle that always really surprises people is that they really are just out in the northern Atlantic water hanging out there. So over the course of a few seasons, he'll find his mate and he will begin to transform into that orange-beaked adult puffin that most of us are used to seeing. So he'll spend his days hunting for fish, sleeping, drifting on the waves, finding his partner. So that's his day job. It's a pretty tough life, as you might imagine, but there is a little bit of risk involved, but they are doing it by instinct. So they know where they're going and they know when they will need to come back when they're ready to mate.
Right, they don't experience any parental care out there once they leave the burrow. It's kind of amazing
It
when you
is.
think about it.
Yeah, it's almost like the definition of it takes a village that, someone asked on the live cams recently if the puffling knows how to hunt before he leaves. And the answer is that he does know that he's supposed to be eating fish because that's what he's eaten all along. But, of course he left before his parents did. His parents, as of today, are still in the burrow. So if you tune back into the live cams, you can still see Willie and Millie. But he knows that he is supposed to start hunting. He definitely can fly at this point now that he left the burrow. So once he's out there, he really will be learning alongside his fellow pufflings until they've all grown enough that their skills are really sharpened. So it's a really impressive thing, and it's not something that a lot of other birds tend to do if they're not seabirds. So it's a really unique characteristic of them.
In a few years, hopefully Burfle returns, but when Burfle returns, we won't recognize Burfle, right? Because the puffin has the juvenile plumage right now, the juvenile bill. Coming back, Burfle will look like an adult, but that's not for a while. So if Burfle returns to Seal Island, when might that be?
Yeah, there's lots of different research out there that estimates the times that puffins return because they do tend to shift a little bit, ranging by puffin. Our puffins tend to be gone for an average of 3 to 5 years. So it's 2025, so that's roughly the 2028 to maybe 2029 season. So most puffins do return as adults to the same island on which they imprinted, which is the island that they hatched on, that they spent their early adulthood on. So we do expect that he'll come back to Seal. He'll come back when he has his mate. So whoever is island supervisor on Seal, when I'm roughly 32 years old, be sure to say hi to him for me if you see his bands.
And puffins are long-lived birds. So Burfle is going into the ocean at a time of tremendous change, especially in the Gulf of Maine, which is one of the fastest warming bodies of water in the world. So what challenges might Burfle face during their lifetime?
To be quite frankly, a lot of it is going to be related back to those changing ocean temperatures, mainly because the puffin diet revolves around fish like herring and hake and butterfish. Those are all fish that prefer colder waters. And like you said, the Gulf of Maine is not only where Project Puffin mainly is, all of our puffin islands are within the Gulf, but it's also, like you said, among the warmest bodies of water on Earth and getting warmer. And that's mainly because of increased greenhouse gases, but it's also because of Arctic ice melt. So, in a lot of ways, similar to other gulfs on the planet, the Gulf of Maine is acting like a warming bathtub. So, it is getting warmer, it's warming pretty rapidly. And what that does, for one, for puffins, is makes it a lot harder for them to hunt. So, they're going where those fish are going, and that leads to longer hunting periods of time, which will then lead to eggs being not quite as incubated as they should be. So probably will lead to some puffins not hitting their growth milestones, growing as quickly as they should be. So we do anticipate that the puffin colony as a whole is going to start having some health issues in the next couple of years. And like you said, because they grow to be usually around 30 years old, they're a little bit more resilient. So if there are changes that are kind of happening year by year, they can adapt to that. And 1 year of a really warm ocean is not going to have too much effect because, again, they live to be 30. So they do act as a good window to how climate change is affecting seabirds. But yeah, we anticipate some health problems. Overfishing is still a big problem in the Gulf of Maine. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the world is going to change over the next few years. We, of course, can do a lot of predicting on that, but generally we're gonna have to wait and see. But the good news is that our researchers gave Burfle all their love and their best wishes when they banded him and put him back in the burrow. So I think that we'll be seeing him in the next couple of years, and I think that he'll be healthy when he comes back, and we'll have to wait and see what the rest of the colony looks like. But I think that our researchers do a phenomenal job of keeping the island healthy and tracking what those birds are doing. So it is a learning experience for all. But we'll be seeing Burfle come back in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I hope so too. And we can help Burfle and other puffins by making sure that we are tackling climate change, reducing our use of fossil fuels, and really kind of transitioning as quickly as possible towards renewable energy. And Quinn, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us and share a little bit of extra information about Burfle and some of the seabirds on Seal Island. Thanks again.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure.
And thanks again to Quinn Burkhart, who is a communication and outreach assistant with Audubon's Seabird Institute. If you want to learn more about the puffins on the island, or just watch, the birds that are remaining on the island, there's still a ton of seabirds on Seal Island right now. Just go to explore.org/puffins, and seabirdinstitute.audubon.org has a lot of information about their research on the islands. You heard Quinn at the end of the interview talk about climate change and its effects on puffins and other seabirds in the Gulf of Maine. While the physical breeding habitat on Seal Island is secure, it is a national wildlife refuge, after all. The ocean habitat that the birds rely upon for food is not. The ocean itself isn't going anywhere, of course, but our rampant use of fossil fuels is forcing the Gulf of Maine to become one of the fastest warming seas on Earth. Already, lobster populations are shifting northward. Most of Maine's famous lobsters might be Canadian by the end of the century. In their wake, blue crabs and other species that are adapted to warming ocean or warmer ocean conditions are moving in. So for the puffins, the concern really is a shift in the range of forage fish. They're not concerned about lobsters or crabs, but things like hake and herring, for example, which are two of the most important forage fish for parent puffins to feed their chicks. They are that's the consequence for them. The shifting of the ranges of those fish species, they're going to do so to find suitable water temperatures. Fish can do that. They can move to deeper water to find colder water if they want to, or they can move north if the water tends to be too warm in the Gulf of Maine. But nesting seabirds have fixed limits on how far they can fly each day to travel from their nesting islands and get back to feed their chicks. And so they can only fly so far, and they can only dive so deep for fish. Other species of fish are moving in from the south. Puffins and other seabirds are adaptable hunters, yet according to the Seabird Institute, it is a matter of chance if the replacement species will be suitable for the seabirds. The importance of forage fish for pufflings depends not only on calories, but the shape of the prey and the adaptations that make the prey hard to swallow, such as spines on a dorsal fin. So it really remains to be seen whether the new species that are coming into the Gulf of Maine will be an adequate replacement for young birds nesting on these islands. We did have one audience question come in from Flower Bear, and I don't know the answer to this question, Flower Bear. Flower Bear wrote, have any of the previous pufflings from this burrow returned to the colony? I think so. However, this is a question that you should ask Quinn. If you go to explore.org/puffins, Quinn has office hours in the comments there throughout the week. So if you post your question there, I bet she will get back to you as soon as she can. I think so. I'll let Quinn prove me wrong if that's the case. So thanks for that question, Flower Bear. Before we get to our final segment here, in More to Explore, we wish Burfle the best of luck. We can help ensure the success of Burfle and other seabirds by working to make systemic changes in our governments and economies to tackle the climate crisis. So Burfle is out on the sea somewhere, Brian. Burfle left the island, but we still have young birds to watch in their journeys towards their first flights.
Yeah, joining Burfle will soon be some osprey and a black eagle. So let's get an update with this week's Egg Watch.
Welcome to the July 28, 2025 edition of Egg Watch on Explore.org. Our list of bird nests that we're including in Egg Watch is shrinking because so many birds have left the nest, but there's still a few hanging out right now and getting ready to fledge. Starting with our osprey in Charlo, Montana. Charlie and Lola are currently raising two osprey chicks there. There were three in this nest, but one happened to die on, I think, July 15, unfortunately. But the other two look healthy and they're doing well. So we're on fledge watch for them right now. They could leave the nest, before the month is out, or in certainly very early August. I think by the end of the first week in August, we can see them leave the nest. And thanks to our Research Institute for partnering with us for this camera. And then in Maryland, Kent Island, Maryland, Tom and Audrey, they have 3 chicks there. We are also on fledge watch with them right now. So they could fledge by the end of the month or in very early August. Our partner at this cam is the Chesapeake Conservancy, so watch for these birds to leave the nest very soon. And then heading back to Seal Island for just a moment. Again, we talked about Burfle leaving the nest, or excuse me, the burrow on or around July 21. So Burfle was out on the sea somewhere, but our black guillemot chick is still in there and still just wolfing down big pieces of fish or whole fish that their parents bring to it. So our expected fledge here, I think early to mid-August, perhaps the second week of August, but fledge in this species for the guillemots is highly variable, anywhere from like 31 days to 50 days. But I'm picking second week of August. That's my pick. We'll see if I'm wrong about that coming up in a few weeks. Farther south on the east coast of the United States, wading birds going down to Florida, spoonbill and alligator cam. We haven't been watching a specific nest here, but lots of different wading bird species, including looking at some good views of wood storks right there. Great view of them. So thanks to our camera operators for looking at these birds. There's still a few soon to fledge birds to be seen on this camera, and our partner there is the Alligator Farm Zoological Park. So check that out if you want to see some great alligators and some birds in the trees. Finally, heading over to Africa with our African black eagle. This bird hatched on June 12 or 13, but this bird also this species, they stay in their nest for a long time, 84 to 99 days on average after they hatch. So this places us for fledging sometime maybe early to mid-September. And our partner for this camera is the Salati Wilderness Foundation and Africam. So be sure to go to Explode.org anytime to watch the devotion of these birds to their eggs and their offspring.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. And including all the other live cams and events, we have so many other events coming up in the next couple of weeks. Let's start with just the events just for Bear Cam. It looks like my title got messed up here. But we do have the Q&A later today on the Brooks Falls camera. And tomorrow we have our regular play-by-play. So that'll be Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific. And then Wednesday we have our bear live chat. This week is the Resilient Bear, hosted by Ranger Ashley and Naomi. And then Thursday we have a regular play-by-play at 2 p.m. Pacific. And then on the Brooks Falls cam again, we'll have a Bear Cam chat Q&A on the YouTube chat. And other events coming up, we have our regular Africam show. It's kind of like a Bear Cam play-by-play, but for the Africam cameras. And then on Thursday, we have the Wild Moment show. And then every day this week, we will have a beluga boat tour. So be sure to check out the events calendar. You see the link here at the bottom, explore.org/event-calendar. And then we're having a special episode of More to Explore in 2 weeks on August 11th. And Mike, do you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, we're going to focus on the Afadi Wachui Leopard Conservation Program in Kenya. Our webcam partner at Impala Live and the Impala Conservation Center are working with biologists and local communities in neighboring ranchlands to better understand the population status of leopards in the region, as well as conflicts between people and leopards, and hopefully working to, of course, reduce conflict between these very different species. So we'll be speaking live with researchers in Kenya. So they'll be joining us live, and we'll be taking your questions as well. If you want to learn a little bit more about Afadi Wachui, please visit impalalive.org/stories. It is currently the featured story on that website. And remember, Impala Live starts with just an M. So it's spelled differently than the Impala, which is the antelope. So the letter M, impalalive.org/stories there.
Awesome. Looking forward to that one. But that is the end of our show today. We're going to leave you here with the Bracken Bat Cave and the millions of bats there. But I want to, of course, give a special thank you to our moderators and camera operators for making the magic happen. And of course, my co-host today, Mike Fitz. And join us next time on August 11th. And until then, happy exploring.